I woke up to what sounded like a freight train grinding through my front yard at 5 in the morning, and when I stumbled to the window, still half asleep, I saw a wall of white blocking my entire view. My name is Stephen Garcia, and I own a 100-acre cattle ranch just outside Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I had lived here for 15 years, and nothing like this had ever happened before. The noise that woke me was an industrial snowplow, and it had just deposited what looked like a mountain of snow directly onto my property. I threw on my boots and winter coat, not bothering with much else, and pushed my way out the back door since the front was completely blocked. The cold hit me like a physical force, but anger kept me warm enough as I trudged around to see the damage. The snow pile was massive, easily 10 feet high and stretching across my entire front pasture. It had crushed one of my fences, and I could see several of my cattle trapped on the wrong side, separated from the main herd. A small orange plow truck was still visible in the distance, heading toward the Pine Ridge Estates development that had sprung up 3 years ago on what used to be the old Morrison property. I knew exactly where that snow had come from and who was responsible. The Pine Ridge Estates Homeowners Association had been a thorn in my side since the development opened, constantly complaining about the smell of cattle, the sound of my tractor early in the morning, and pretty much everything else about ranch life. I pulled out my phone and took dozens of photos and videos, documenting everything. The sun was starting to rise, casting an orange glow over the absurd mountain of snow that now dominated my front property. I could see debris mixed in with the snow, chunks of asphalt, gravel, even what looked like part of a mailbox. They had not just plowed their streets. They had dumped every bit of snow from their entire development onto my land. My phone rang before I could finish my documentation. It was my neighbor, Frank, who ran a smaller ranch on the adjacent property. "Steve, you seeing this?" he asked, his voice tight with disbelief. "I am standing in it," I replied. "They dumped it all on my front pasture, crushed my fence, separated my herd. They got me too, but not as bad. Maybe 3 feet along my eastern boundary. This is insane. You calling the sheriff?" First on my list after I finished documenting. I spent another 30 minutes taking photos from every angle, making sure to capture the damage to my fence and the distressed cattle. Then I called the Teton County Sheriff's Office. The dispatcher sounded sympathetic, but explained that the earliest someone could come out was later that afternoon due to the storm response. I told her I would be waiting. Next, I needed to move my cattle to safety and assess the full damage. I fired up my old Ford tractor and spent the next 2 hours clearing a path and repairing enough of the fence to get my herd back together. The whole time, I was seething. This was not just an inconvenience. This was destruction of property, and someone was going to pay. Around 9 in the morning, as I was finishing with the cattle, a silver Lexus SUV came crawling up my driveway. Well, what used to be my driveway before it became a snow canyon. A woman emerged, wearing a cream-colored puffy jacket that probably cost more than my truck and boots, so clean they had clearly never seen actual ranch work. "Excuse me," she called out in a voice that immediately set my teeth on edge. "Are you the owner of this property?" I walked over, still carrying the fence repair tools. "I am Stephen Garcia, and you are?" "I am Patricia Henderson, president of the Pine Ridge Estates Homeowners Association." She said it like she was announcing royalty. "I am here to discuss the snow situation." "The snow situation," I repeated slowly. "You mean the 10 feet of snow your association illegally dumped on my private property?" Her expression shifted into what I recognized as a well-practiced look of concern that did not reach her eyes. "Now, let's not be dramatic." The snowplow company we hired had to put the snow somewhere. Your property was simply the most logical location. I stared at her, genuinely unsure if she was serious. Logical? You think dumping snow onto someone else's private property without permission is logical? We have a community to think about, Patricia said, her tone becoming more condescending. Our residents pay significant HOA fees for services like snow removal. We cannot have our streets blocked. Surely you understand that your ranch land can handle a little extra snow. A little extra snow. I gestured at the mountain behind me. That is 10 feet of snow mixed with road debris. It destroyed my fence and endangered my livestock. That is illegal dumping, trespassing, and property damage. Patricia's fake concern evaporated. I think you are overreacting. Perhaps if you maintained your property better, a little snow would not be such an issue. And while I am here, I should mention that several of our residents have complained about the smell coming from your ranch. We would appreciate it if you could do something about that. The smell of cattle. On a cattle ranch that has been here for over 70 years, long before your development existed. Times change, Mr. Garcia. Pine Ridge Estates represents progress and community standards. We would be happy to purchase your property at a fair market price if ranching has become too difficult for you. Now I understood. This was not about snow removal. This was about forcing me out. The development had been trying to expand, and my ranch sat right in the middle of their planned growth area. They had made offers before, all of which I had refused. This was a new tactic. Get off my property, I said quietly. Excuse me. You heard me. Get off my land right now, or I will call the sheriff and have you removed for trespassing. Patricia's face flushed red. How dare you speak to me that way? I am trying to be neighborly and work this out reasonably. There is nothing reasonable about what you did. You have until the count of 5. 1. She huffed and turned on her heel, marching back to her Lexus. Before she got in, she called back. You will regret this. The HOA has lawyers and we know our rights. So do I called back. And I have a sheriff coming this afternoon to document your illegal dumping. She peeled out as much as anyone can peel out in several inches of snow, fishtailing slightly before getting her expensive SUV under control. I watched her go, then pulled out my phone and added notes about our conversation while it was fresh in my mind. The sheriff's deputy, a young guy named Martinez, showed up around 3 that afternoon. He was thorough, I will give him that, taking his own photos and measurements, interviewing me about what happened and when. He also confirmed what I already suspected. This is definitely illegal dumping, Deputy Martinez said, shaking his head as he looked at the snow mountain. They needed a permit to dispose of snow on property that is not theirs, and they definitely did not have one. The property damage is clear too. You are going to want to file a formal complaint. Already planning on it. Good. I will file my report today. You should also document your financial losses, repair costs, everything. And Mr. Garcia, get a lawyer. These HOA types can be nasty when they do not get their way. I took his advice seriously. That evening, I called Jim Patterson, a lawyer in Jackson who I had used for some property boundary disputes years ago. We set up a meeting for the next morning, but the HOA was not done. The next day, before I could even get to my lawyer appointment, I found a citation taped to my door. It was from the Pine Ridge Estates HOA, claiming that my property was in violation of community aesthetic standards, and demanding I remove the unsightly snow pile within 48 hours or face daily fines of $500. I actually laughed out loud. They had dumped the snow on my property and were now trying to fine me for it. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. Jim Patterson laughed too when I showed him the citation. He was in his 60s, with white hair and the weathered look of someone who had spent his life in Wyoming. His office was cluttered with case files and had the comfortable, lived-in feeling of a place where real work got done. "Well, they have got nerve. I will give them that," Jim said, leaning back in his chair. "But they have also handed us a beautiful piece of evidence. They are essentially admitting they put the snow there. So what are my options? Several. First, we file a formal lawsuit for property damage, illegal dumping, and trespassing. We can add emotional distress if you want. Second, we file a complaint with the county about the illegal dumping. Third, and this is my favorite, we send them a letter explaining that they are liable for all damages and removal costs, and if they do not handle it immediately, we will do it ourselves and bill them for it. How much are we talking for removal?" Jim tapped his pen against his desk. "Legitimate removal of that much snow, plus fence repair, loss of use of your pasture, potential harm to your cattle from the stress. I would estimate $20,000 to $30,000 conservatively." I whistled. "Think they will pay it? Not a chance. Which is why we will end up in court." "But that is okay. You have got clear documentation, a sheriff's report, and their own admission via this ridiculous citation. It is a strong case." We spent the next hour going over everything, and Jim started drafting the demand letter. He said he would have it sent via certified mail that same day. I left his office feeling better, but when I got back to the ranch, I found another problem. Several of my cattle were showing signs of stress, not eating properly and staying huddled together. I called my vet, Dr. Sarah Chen, who came out that evening. "It is stress from the disruption and the noise," she explained after examining them. "They should be fine, but you need to keep a close eye on them. If they do not start eating normally in the next day or two, we might need to intervene." More damages to add to the list. I documented everything Dr. Chen said and added it to my growing file. The HOA's response came faster than I expected. 2 days after Jim sent the demand letter, I received a certified letter of my own. It was from the law firm of Whitmore and Associates, representing the Pine Ridge Estates, HOA. The letter claimed that I was being unreasonable, that the snow removal was necessary for public safety, and that any damage to my property was minimal and my own responsibility as a property owner in the area. They also threatened to file a nuisance lawsuit against me for the smell and noise from my ranch. "They are bluffing," Jim said when I called him. "The nuisance claim will not hold water. Your ranch predates their development by decades. They bought property next to a working ranch and cannot now claim it is a nuisance, but this does tell us they are going to fight. So we take them to court. We do. I will file the lawsuit this week." But before the lawsuit could be filed, we got hit with another massive snowstorm. This one dumped 2 feet of fresh snow across the whole valley over a 36-hour period. I spent those 2 days making sure my cattle were safe and my equipment was ready for the cleanup. On the morning after the storm cleared, I was eating breakfast when I heard it again. That same grinding, rumbling sound of a large snowplow. I ran to the window and sure enough, another plow truck was heading toward my property line. This time, I was ready. I grabbed my camera and my phone and ran outside. The plow truck, a different one than before but clearly contracted by the HOA, was pushing a massive amount of snow directly toward my land again. "Hey," I shouted, running toward the truck and filming. "Stop! You are on private property." The driver either did not hear me or did not care. He made one more pass, adding another several feet of snow to the existing pile, then started to turn around. I managed to get clear footage of the truck, including its company name and number on the side. Mountain Peak Snow Services, Jackson Hole. The driver saw me and stopped, rolling down his window. He was an older guy, probably in his 50s, with a thick beard. "You got a problem," he called out. "Yes, I have got a problem. You are dumping snow on my private property without permission." He looked uncomfortable. "Look, man, I just go where I am told. The HOA paid us to clear their streets. And they told you to dump it here. They said this was the designated dump site. You are telling me it is not. This is my ranch. Private property. You are trespassing and illegally dumping." His expression changed from defensive to worried. "Ah, hell. They did not tell me that. They said it was community property. Look, I am sorry. I am just going to finish up the streets and leave it be. I am going to have to talk to my boss about this." "You do that. And tell your boss I have got everything on video, including your truck's information. If any more snow ends up on my property, I will be pressing charges." He nodded and drove off, looking genuinely upset. I felt a bit bad for him. He was just doing his job based on what the HOA told him. But my sympathy had limits. This was the second time, which meant it was not an accident or a mistake. This was deliberate. I immediately called Jim Patterson and sent him the video. "This is actually perfect," Jim said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "This shows a pattern of behavior. They did not stop after the first time. They did not stop after receiving our demand letter. They are intentionally and repeatedly dumping snow on your property. This strengthens our case significantly." "I want more than just money at this point," I said. "I want them to stop. We will file for an emergency injunction. It will prohibit them from depositing any more snow on your property while the lawsuit proceeds. I can have it ready by tomorrow morning." True to his word, Jim filed the injunction request the next day. We had a hearing scheduled for 2 days later. In the meantime, I had to deal with the snow that was already there. The pile was now truly massive, maybe 12 to 15 feet high in places, stretching across a significant portion of my front pasture. The land underneath was completely unusable, and spring was still months away. Even when the snow melted, I would be dealing with the debris and damage. I own a decent snowplow attachment for my tractor. I use it to keep my driveway and the paths to my barns clear during winter. But this was beyond what my equipment could handle efficiently. Still, I had to do something. The snow was blocking access to part of my property, and every day it sat there was another day I could not use that land. I spent a full day moving what snow I could, pushing it into less obstructive areas. It was exhausting work, and I barely made a dent in the overall pile, but it gave me time to think. And the more I thought, the angrier I got. The injunction hearing was held at the Teton County Courthouse. Jim and I sat on one side, while Patricia Henderson and 2 lawyers from Whitmore and Associates sat on the other. The judge was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s named Judge Morrison. Jim presented our case clearly. 2 instances of illegal dumping, documented property damage, a sheriff's report, and evidence that the HOA was continuing its behavior despite being notified of the legal issues. The HOA's lawyers argued that the snow removal was necessary for public safety and that we were being unreasonable. They claimed there was nowhere else to put the snow and that my ranch land was underutilized. Judge Morrison was not impressed. "Counselor, are you actually arguing that your client has the right to dump snow on someone else's private property without permission because their land is underutilized?" She asked the HOA's lead lawyer, a slick guy in an expensive suit named Robert Whitmore. "We are arguing that the emergency nature of snow removal during a major storm creates certain necessities," Whitmore replied smoothly. "And I am sure if the situation were reversed, your HOA residents would be perfectly happy to have a rancher dump manure in their yards because he needed somewhere to put it, and their lawns were underutilized. A few people in the courtroom chuckled. Whitmore's face reddened slightly. "That is not comparable, Your Honor." "It is exactly comparable. One person's emergency does not grant them the right to use another person's property without permission." Judge Morrison looked at the papers in front of her. "The injunction is granted. The Pine Ridge Estates Homeowners Association and any contractors working on their behalf are prohibited from depositing snow, debris, or any other material on the plaintiff's property. Violation of this injunction will result in contempt of court charges. Is that clear?" "Yes, Your Honor," both sides replied. As we left the courthouse, Patricia Henderson glared at me with pure hatred. "You just made a big mistake," she hissed as she passed. "That sounded like a threat," Jim said loudly enough for the HOA lawyers to hear. "You might want to advise your client about making threats, counselor." Whitmore grabbed Patricia's arm and steered her away, speaking to her in low, urgent tones. "Well, that went well," I said as Jim and I walked to our cars. "It did. But watch yourself, Steve. People like that do not like losing, and they do not like being told no. Be careful." I took his warning seriously, but I also felt a sense of vindication. The law was on my side, and the HOA could not keep bullying me, or so I thought. 3 days later, I received a notice from the Teton County Planning and Zoning Department. Someone had filed a complaint claiming I was running a commercial operation without proper permits. The notice said an inspector would be coming out within the week to investigate. I had all my permits in order. I had been ranching this land for 15 years and had everything properly documented. But I knew exactly who had filed the complaint. This was retaliation, pure and simple. The inspector, a tired-looking man named Greg who clearly had better things to do, came out on a Tuesday. He spent 2 hours going through everything, checking my permits, looking at my operation, making notes. "Everything looks fine," he said finally. "Your permits are all current and valid. I will file my report saying the complaint was unfounded." "Can you tell me who filed the complaint?" He hesitated. "Technically, that information is public record, but let me just say this complaint came from someone associated with Pine Ridge Estates. I have been getting a lot of complaints from them lately about various things. Most of them turn out to be frivolous. After he left, I called Jim and told him what happened. Add it to the lawsuit," he said. "Pattern of harassment. It all helps our case." The lawsuit was scheduled for a court date 3 months out, which was apparently fast for civil court. In the meantime, winter continued, though thankfully without any more major storms. The massive snow pile on my property began to settle and compact, but it was still enormous. I kept having to deal with harassment from the HOA. They filed a complaint with the county about my cattle being too close to the property line, even though I was well within my legal rights. They filed a noise complaint about my tractor, claiming I was violating quiet hours, even though I only ran equipment during reasonable daytime hours and agricultural operations were exempt from those ordinances anyway. Each complaint meant an inspector or a deputy coming out, investigating and finding nothing wrong. Each time, I documented everything and sent it to Jim. "They are building our case for us," Jim said. "Every frivolous complaint, every act of harassment, it all shows a pattern of trying to force you out. The judge is going to see right through this." But the constant hassle was wearing on me. I could not just run my ranch in peace. I was spending hours every week dealing with inspectors, filling out paperwork, defending myself against baseless complaints. Then, in early February, we got another major storm warning. 2 to 3 feet of snow expected over 2 days. I prepared as I always did, making sure my cattle had shelter and food, that my equipment was ready. that I had enough supplies to wait out the storm. The snow started falling on a Wednesday evening and did not stop until Friday morning. When it finally cleared, I had about 30 inches of fresh powder across the entire ranch. The existing snow pile had gotten even bigger from the natural snowfall. I was out early Friday morning starting my cleanup when I saw the plow truck. It was the same Mountain Peak Snow Services truck from before, but this time it stayed on the Pine Ridge Estate side of the property line. The driver saw me watching and gave me a wave. At least they were learning. But then, around noon, a different truck appeared. This one was bigger, more industrial, and it was definitely heading toward my property. I jumped on my tractor and drove to intercept it. The truck stopped right at my property line. The driver got out, a huge guy in a heavy winter coat. "You Stephen Garcia," he called out. "I am." "And you are on private property?" "Actually, I am not. I am on the county road right-of-way, but I wanted to talk to you before I do anything." I climbed down from my tractor. "I am listening. Name's Mike. I run Mountain Peak Snow Services." My guy told me what happened before, with the HOA telling us your land was a dump site. "I am here to apologize and to let you know we are not working for them anymore." "Oh. Yeah. I do not like being lied to, and I do not like getting my company involved in legal trouble." I told the HOA we were done, but now they have hired someone else and I thought you should know. "Who did they hire?" "Some outfit called Rapid Snow Removal, not local. They brought them in from Idaho Falls. I am telling you this because those guys do not have a good reputation. They cut corners and they do not care much about property rights or regulations." "Thanks for the warning." "No problem. And hey, if you need any legitimate snow removal, give me a call. I will give you a fair price." He handed me a business card. After Mike left, I immediately called Jim and told him about the new snow removal company. "I will send them a copy of the injunction," Jim said. "They need to know it exists. If they violate it, we will have them in contempt too." "You think they will care, honestly?" "Probably not if the HOA is paying them enough, but at least we will have proof we notified them." That weekend passed quietly, but I had a bad feeling. The HOA had been too quiet since the injunction. They were planning something. Monday morning, I found out what. I woke up to my phone ringing. It was Frank, my neighbor. "Steve, you need to get out here. They are dumping again." I threw on clothes and ran outside. Sure enough, a large truck from Rapid Snow Removal was at my property line, and it had already pushed a substantial amount of snow onto my land. I grabbed my phone and started recording as I ran toward them. "Stop! You are violating a court order," I shouted. There were two guys this time, and they both looked like they did not care about anything I had to say. The driver, a lean guy with a scraggly beard, just laughed. "We got paid to move snow, and that is what we are doing. There is a court injunction prohibiting this. You are in contempt of court." "Then call the cops," he said with a shrug, and continued pushing snow onto my property. I did exactly that. I called 911 and reported the violation of the court order. Then I called Jim. "Get as much documentation as you can," Jim said. "Video, photos, everything. This is contempt of court and they are going to regret it." It took the deputies about 20 minutes to arrive. By then, Rapid Snow Removal had dumped several more loads onto my property. When the deputies showed up, the snow removal guys actually tried to leave, but the deputies stopped them. What followed was a tense conversation where the deputies explained that the drivers were violating a court order. The drivers claimed they did not know about any court order, that they were just hired to move snow. The deputies confiscated copies of their contracts and cited both drivers, but the damage was done. More snow on my property, more disruption, more proof that the HOA was willing to ignore court orders. The next day, we were back in front of Judge Morrison for an emergency contempt hearing. This time, the courtroom had a different energy. Judge Morrison was clearly angry. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said, looking at the HOA's lawyers. 10 days after I issued an injunction specifically prohibiting your client from dumping snow on the plaintiff's property, they hired a new company to do exactly that. Whitmore stood up. "Your Honor, the HOA was not directly involved in that action. The snow removal company acted independently." Judge Morrison picked up a paper from her desk. "According to the contract seized by the Sheriff's Department, Pine Ridge Estates HOA hired Rapid Snow Removal and specifically directed them where to dump the snow. That is not independent action. That is direct violation of a court order. Your Honor, the community has to maintain its streets. We have elderly residents, emergency vehicle access to consider. Counselor, we have been through this. Your client's needs do not grant them the right to violate court orders or use another person's property. This court is finding the Pine Ridge Estates Homeowners Association in contempt. The HOA is fined $10,000, payable immediately to the court. Additionally, the HOA will be responsible for complete removal of all snow from the plaintiff's property at the HOA's expense, to be completed within 30 days. If another violation occurs, the fine will increase to $50,000, and I will consider criminal contempt charges against the HOA board members personally. Am I making myself clear?" Patricia Henderson, who was in the courtroom, turned pale. Whitmore nodded stiffly. "Yes, Your Honor." "Good. Because if I see this case in my courtroom again for another violation, someone is going to jail. Dismissed." Walking out of the courthouse, I felt vindicated but also worried. The HOA was not going to take this lying down, and I knew Patricia Henderson well enough by now to know she would see this as a personal attack. Over the next week, I had several different snow removal companies contact me. The HOA had apparently hired a legitimate company to remove the snow from my property as ordered. The company, a professional outfit called Summit Snow Management, came out and spent 3 full days removing the snow, trucking it to an actual legal disposal site 20 miles away. The foreman, a polite guy named Carlos, apologized for the whole situation. "We heard about what happened. That HOA is crazy. We have dealt with them before and they are always difficult. They hire you often, used to, but we will not work for them anymore after this. Too much liability. They kept trying to tell us to cut corners, dump snow in places we legally could not. We do not operate that way." It was interesting to hear that other companies had similar problems with the HOA. It fit the pattern of behavior we were documenting. With the snow finally removed from my property, I could assess the full damage. The fence repairs alone were going to cost about $8,000. The pasture had significant damage from the weight of the snow and the debris mixed in. I would need to reseed and repair the ground come spring, probably another $5,000. The stress to my cattle had resulted in lower milk production, and 2 cows that needed medical treatment, about $3,000 in vet bills and lost production. Jim incorporated all of this into the lawsuit. Our total claim was now around $45,000, including removal costs, damages, lost use of the property, and harassment. The main court date was now just a month away. The HOA tried to get it postponed, claiming they needed more time to prepare, but Judge Morrison denied the request. In the meantime, I focused on my ranch. Winter was starting to wind down and I had spring preparations to think about, but I could not shake the feeling that the HOA was not done yet. I was right. In mid-March, about 2 weeks before the court date, I received a letter from the Pine Ridge Estates HOA. It was not from their lawyers this time. It was signed by Patricia Henderson personally. The letter claimed that after reviewing their records, they had discovered that a portion of my property had actually been part of the original Morrison property that was sold to create Pine Ridge Estates. According to their claim, about 10 acres of my ranch, including the area where they had dumped the snow, was actually theirs due to a surveying error from decades ago. It was complete nonsense. I had clear title to my property, with surveys and documentation going back 70 years. But it was a clever move. They were trying to create confusion and muddy the waters before the trial. I immediately forwarded the letter to Jim. "This is desperation," Jim said when he called me back. "They know they are going to lose, so they are trying to create doubt. Do you have your property surveys, all of them, going back to when my uncle bought the place in 1955? Perfect. Bring them all. We will shut this down fast." The next week, I had a surveyor come out to do a new, comprehensive survey of my property boundaries. It cost me $2,000, but it was worth it. The survey confirmed exactly what I already knew. My property lines were exactly where they had always been, and the area where the HOA dumped snow was definitely my land. But the HOA was not done with their harassment. 2 days before the trial, I found my mailbox smashed and graffiti spray painted on my fence. The graffiti said things like "sell out" and "leave." I called the sheriff's department, and they sent a deputy to document it. I also set up security cameras around my property entrance. I could not prove the HOA was directly responsible for the vandalism, but the timing was suspicious. Finally, the trial date arrived. It was a cold Monday morning in late March. The courtroom was more crowded than I expected. Several residents from Pine Ridge Estates were there, apparently supporting their HOA. A few other ranchers from the area showed up to support me, including Frank. The trial lasted 2 full days. Jim presented our case methodically. The initial illegal dumping, the property damage, the contempt of court, the continued harassment, the frivolous complaints, and the latest attempt to claim my property was not actually mine. The HOA's lawyers tried to argue that the snow removal was necessary, that I was being unreasonable, that the community's needs should be considered. They tried to present their property line claim, but Judge Morrison quickly shut that down after reviewing my surveys. This claim is completely unsupported and appears to be an attempt to confuse the issues before this court, Judge Morrison said. The property boundaries are clear and undisputed. We will not be discussing this further. The HOA called several witnesses, including Patricia Henderson, who testified that the HOA was just trying to maintain a safe community and that I was being difficult. Under Jim's cross-examination, however, she fell apart. "Mrs. Henderson, is it true that the Pine Ridge Estates HOA has made multiple offers to purchase Mr. Garcia's property?" Jim asked. "We have made some inquiries, yes, and Mr. Garcia has refused those offers." "Yes." "Is it also true that in HOA board meetings, which are a matter of public record, there has been discussion about expanding the development onto what is currently ranch land?" Patricia hesitated. "We have discussed future growth possibilities." "And Mr. Garcia's property is right in the middle of your desired expansion area, is it not? I suppose it is adjacent to areas we have considered." "Mrs. Henderson, I am going to ask you directly. Was the dumping of snow on Mr. Garcia's property an attempt to make his ranch operation more difficult in hopes he would sell to the HOA? Absolutely not. That is a ridiculous accusation. Then why, after being served with a court injunction, did your HOA hire another company to continue dumping snow on his property?" "That was a miscommunication. We did not intend. You did not intend to violate a court order. You did not intend to continue dumping snow on property that a judge had explicitly ordered you to leave alone. Patricia's face was red, and she stammered through several non-answers before Whitmore objected, and Judge Morrison sustained it. But the damage was done. It was clear to everyone in the courtroom what had really happened. I testified about the damages, the harassment, the constant complaints and inspections. Frank testified as a neighbor, confirming that the HOA had dumped some snow on his property too, though not as much. Dr. Chen, my vet, testified about the stress to my cattle. The surveyor testified about my property boundaries. By the end of the second day, I felt good about our case. But I also knew that trials could be unpredictable. Judge Morrison said she would review everything and issue her ruling within a week. That week was tense. I tried to focus on ranch work, but I kept running the trial through my head, wondering if we had done enough, if the judge would rule in our favor. The ruling came on a Tuesday afternoon. Jim called me as soon as he got the notification. "We won," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "We won everything." Judge Morrison's written ruling was comprehensive. She found that the Pine Ridge Estates HOA had engaged in illegal dumping, trespassing, property damage, contempt of court, and harassment. She awarded us $45,000 in damages and costs. She also issued a permanent injunction prohibiting the HOA from dumping anything on my property and from filing frivolous complaints against me. But the most interesting part was at the end of the ruling. Judge Morrison noted that the HOA's behavior suggested potential criminal activity and recommended that the county prosecutor review the case for possible charges of criminal trespassing and illegal dumping. "What does that mean?" I asked Jim. "It means the county might file criminal charges against the HOA board members. The judge basically told the prosecutor this was bad enough to warrant criminal investigation." Can they actually charge them? Absolutely. What they did was not just a civil matter. Illegal dumping on this scale, especially after a court order, can be criminal. And if the prosecutor can show it was intentional, which I think we did, they could be looking at significant fines or even jail time for the board members. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the Teton County Prosecutor's Office. They wanted to interview me about the HOA's actions. I met with an assistant prosecutor named Lisa Martinez, a sharp woman in her 30s who took detailed notes as I went through everything that had happened. "We are considering filing charges against the HOA board members for criminal trespassing, illegal dumping, and vandalism," she said. "Your case is not the only complaint we have received about this HOA. They have been engaging in similar behavior with other properties in the area." "Really?" "Yes. After your case became public record, 3 other property owners came forward with similar stories. The HOA has been trying to force out anyone who does not fit their vision for the area. We think we have enough to file charges." A month later, the charges were filed. Patricia Henderson and 4 other HOA board members were charged with multiple counts of criminal trespassing, illegal dumping, and conspiracy to commit property damage. The vandalism charges were not filed because we could not definitively prove who did it. The criminal case moved faster than I expected. The HOA board members initially tried to fight it, but the evidence was overwhelming. In addition to my case, the prosecutor had documented instances where the HOA had dumped yard waste on an elderly couple's property, had a tree service cut down trees on someone else's land without permission, and had even redirected drainage to flood a property they wanted to purchase. Faced with the evidence, the HOA board members took a plea deal. Patricia Henderson and 2 others pleaded guilty to criminal trespassing and illegal dumping. They were sentenced to 6 months in jail, suspended, 2 years probation, 300 hours of community service each, and were prohibited from serving on any HOA board in Wyoming for 5 years. They were also jointly and severally liable for the $45,000 judgment against the HOA, plus an additional $20,000 in criminal fines. The other 2 board members, who had been less involved, got lighter sentences but similar probation and prohibition from HOA service. The Pine Ridge Estates HOA itself was placed under court supervision for 2 years. A court-appointed administrator would oversee all major decisions to ensure compliance with laws and regulations. Through all of this, I had been keeping a secret. All winter, while dealing with the lawsuits and the harassment, I had been planning something. The HOA had a clubhouse, a fancy building right in the center of their development that they were very proud of. It had a gym, a pool, meeting rooms, the whole works. Patricia Henderson had once bragged that it cost over $2 million to build. After the snow removal companies had cleaned up my property, I had kept my own snow removal equipment ready, and I had been watching the weather forecasts carefully. Another big storm was predicted for late April, which was unusual but not unheard of in Wyoming. The storm hit on a Tuesday night, dumping 18 inches of heavy, wet spring snow. It was the kind of snow that was perfect for packing and moving. By Wednesday morning, the storm had passed, leaving clear blue skies. I fired up my plow truck at 4 in the morning. I had upgraded my equipment with the money from the initial judgment payment, buying a proper commercial-grade snowplow attachment for my largest truck. I also rented a small loader for the day. The Pine Ridge Estates development was quiet at that early hour. Most residents were still asleep. The streets had not been plowed yet. I drove my truck through the development, staying on the public streets where I had every legal right to be. The clubhouse was set back from the main road, with a large parking lot in front and landscaped areas around it. The building was dark, closed until later in the morning. I positioned my truck and began plowing. I pushed snow from the parking lot, from the access road, from every available surface, and piled it in front of the clubhouse. Load after load, I built a wall of snow in front of every entrance. I used the loader to pack it tight and build it higher. The sun was rising as I finished, and I stepped back to admire my work. The clubhouse was completely inaccessible, buried behind 8 to 10 feet of snow on every side. Every door was blocked. Every window on the ground floor was covered. The building looked like it had been through an avalanche. I was packing up my equipment when the first residents started appearing. A woman in a jogging outfit stopped and stared, her mouth hanging open. A man walking his dog actually laughed. "Did you do this?" the dog walker asked, approaching me. I did. Every bit of this snow came from public areas of the development. The streets, the parking lot, all places where snow removal is necessary for safety. I smiled at him. I was just helping out with snow removal. He grinned. "I heard about what the HOA did to your ranch. This is beautiful, man." Just beautiful. By 6 in the morning, a small crowd had gathered. Some people were angry, but more were amused or openly supportive. The HOA had not been popular even within the development. Their high fees and petty rules had made enemies. Patricia Henderson showed up around 7, her face turning purple when she saw the clubhouse. You did this," she screamed, pointing at me. I did. I removed snow from public areas for safety reasons and deposited it in an available space. You know exactly what your HOA did to my ranch. This is destruction of property. This is vandalism. Actually, it is snow. It will melt. and I made sure not to damage anything. Unlike when your HOA crushed my fence and dumped debris all over my pasture. A sheriff's deputy pulled up, lights flashing. It was Deputy Martinez, the same one who had documented the original dumping on my property. He looked at the buried clubhouse, looked at me, and I swear he was trying not to smile. "I got a call about vandalism," he said. "This man buried our clubhouse," Patricia shrieked. Deputy Martinez walked around the snow pile examining it. "Did you damage the building in any way?" he asked me. "No, sir. Just piled snow in front of it. No contact with the structure itself." "And this snow came from public streets in the parking lot." "All areas where snow removal is necessary and legal." Deputy Martinez nodded slowly. "So you removed snow from public areas and placed it on what appears to be HOA common property. The clubhouse parking lot is HOA common property, correct?" he asked Patricia. "Yes, and HOA members are allowed to use common property." "He is not an HOA member. But the streets are public, and anyone can legally remove snow from public streets. And I do not see any posted signs prohibiting snow removal or snow placement in this area." Deputy Martinez looked at me. "I do not see a crime here, madam. This is a civil matter between you and Mr. Garcia. You will need to contact your lawyer." Patricia looked like she was going to explode. "After everything he has done, after all the trouble he caused." "You mean after your HOA illegally dumped snow on his property, violated a court order, and got convicted of criminal trespassing?" Deputy Martinez said. "That trouble?" Several people in the crowd laughed. Patricia shot them all venomous looks before stomping back to her car and speeding off. I shook Deputy Martinez's hand. "Thanks for being fair. Hey, I just enforced the law, and between you and me, watching you haul that snow removal company into court was satisfying. Too many HOAs think they can do whatever they want." He lowered his voice. "Off the record, this is hilarious. But watch yourself. They might try something civil. I've got a good lawyer." Sure enough, by that afternoon, I received an angry phone call from Robert Whitmore, the HOA's lawyer. "What you did was outrageous and illegal," he started. "Actually, it was perfectly legal," I replied calmly. "I removed snow from public areas and placed it on HOA common property. No damage to any structure, no trespassing, no violation of any law or ordinance. You intentionally blocked access to the clubhouse. Snow does that sometimes. I am sure the HOA can hire a snow removal company to clear it. Might I suggest Summit Snow Management? They did an excellent job removing snow from my property." There was a long pause. "You think you are very clever, do not you? I think I am a rancher who is tired of being harassed. Your clients dumped snow on my property twice, violated a court order, and got convicted of crimes. I removed snow from public areas. We are not the same. We will see what a judge says about this. Go ahead and file. I will be sure to bring up how this is more harassment, which violates the court order already in place. Your clients are on probation. Do you really want to test Judge Morrison again?" Another long pause. "Stay away from Pine Ridge Estates, Mr. Garcia." "Gladly. As long as Pine Ridge Estates stays off my property." He hung up. I never heard from Whitmore again. The HOA did not file any complaint about the clubhouse. It took them 3 days and a substantial amount of money to clear all the snow I had piled up. I heard through the grapevine that the removal cost them over $15,000 because the snow had compacted and frozen into a solid mass. The next few months were peaceful. Spring came to Wyoming in its usual dramatic fashion, snow melting and revealing green grass almost overnight. I repaired my pastures, replaced the damaged sections of fence, and got my ranch back to normal operation. The Pine Ridge Estates HOA underwent significant changes. Under the court-appointed administrator, several of the more oppressive rules were eliminated. The HOA fees were reduced. And most satisfying to me, the HOA abandoned their expansion plans. The property adjacent to my ranch that they had been eyeing was sold to a young couple who planned to start their own small ranch. Frank and I helped them get started, sharing equipment and advice. It felt good to have allies nearby instead of enemies. As for Patricia Henderson and the other board members, they fulfilled their community service requirements and stayed quiet. I saw Patricia once at a grocery store in Jackson. She saw me, turned pale, and walked quickly in the other direction. I did not mind. The less interaction I had with her, the better. The $45,000 judgment was paid in full by the HOA's insurance company, minus the deductible that came from HOA funds. I used the money to make improvements to my ranch, including a new barn and upgraded equipment. Jim Patterson and I became good friends through all of this. He still calls occasionally to check in and to remind me that I have a standing offer. If any other HOA tries anything, he will handle it pro bono just for the satisfaction of taking them down. The criminal case became something of a local legend. Other HOAs in the area became noticeably more careful about how they operated. No one wanted to be the next Pine Ridge Estates, with their board members criminally convicted and their reputation destroyed. One afternoon in late summer, I was sitting on my porch, watching my cattle graze peacefully in the pasture that had been buried under snow just months before, when Frank drove up. "Got a minute?" he asked, climbing out of his truck. "Always." He pulled out a newspaper and handed it to me. It was the Jackson Hole News. The headline read, "HOA Reform Bill Passes State Legislature." I scanned the article. After the Pine Ridge Estates case, and several similar incidents around Wyoming, the state legislature had passed a new law strengthening property rights and imposing strict penalties on HOAs that violated them. The law was nicknamed the Garcia Bill, after my case. "You are famous," Frank said with a grin. "I just wanted them to leave me alone." "Well, you did more than that. You changed the law. Every property owner in Wyoming has more protection now because of what you did." I had not thought about it that way. I had just been defending my ranch, my livelihood, my rights, but Frank was right. The fight had been bigger than just me versus the HOA. "You think it will help?" I asked. "Already has. My cousin was dealing with an HOA trying to force him to change his fence. He mentioned your case and the new law, and they backed down immediately. They do not want to be the next example." We sat on the porch, drinking beer and watching the sun set over the mountains. It was peaceful. It was exactly why I loved ranching, why I had fought so hard to protect this place. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from Jim. "Thought you should know Patricia Henderson's house just went on the market. Looks like she is leaving Wyoming." I showed the text to Frank and we both laughed. "Good riddance," Frank said. "I will drink to that." As fall approached and the first hints of cold weather began creeping back into the air, I found myself thinking about snow. Last winter had been a nightmare, but I was prepared now. My equipment was better. My fences were stronger. My documentation was meticulous. And everyone in the county knew that Stephen Garcia was not someone you messed with. The Pine Ridge Estates HOA sent me a formal letter of apology in October, required as part of their probation terms. It was clearly written by a lawyer, carefully worded to apologize without admitting more liability than they already had. I framed it and hung it in my barn as a reminder. Winter did come again, as it always does in Wyoming. The first snow fell in early November, a light dusting that made everything look clean and fresh. I watched it from my window, coffee in hand, feeling at peace. There were no incidents that winter. No snow dumped on my property. No harassment. No complaints. The HOA left me completely alone, and I returned the favor by leaving them alone too. The court supervision of the HOA ended after 2 years as scheduled. By then, the entire board had turned over. New people, more reasonable people, had taken over. The new board president actually came to visit me that spring, introducing herself and making it clear they wanted a good relationship with their neighbors. "We have learned from past mistakes," she said. "We want to be good neighbors." I appreciated the gesture. We were not going to be best friends, but cordial neighbors was good enough for me. 5 years after the snow dumping incident, I was interviewed by a Wyoming public radio station for a story about HOA abuses and property rights. The journalist asked me if I regretted burying the clubhouse in snow. "Not even a little bit," I said honestly. "They buried my ranch. I just returned the favor. Sometimes bullies need to understand what it feels like to be on the receiving end." The interview got picked up by several national outlets. I received letters and emails from people all over the country who had dealt with HOA problems, thanking me for standing up to them. Some of the stories I heard were worse than mine. People who had lost their homes or spent their life savings fighting HOA abuses. It made me realize how lucky I had been. I had the resources to fight, a good lawyer, a judge who saw through the HOA's tactics, and a community that supported me. Not everyone had those advantages. I started speaking at property rights groups occasionally, sharing my story and encouraging others to document everything, know their rights, and not be afraid to stand up to HOAs when they overstepped. If my experience could help someone else, it was worth the time. The ranch continued to thrive. My cattle herd grew. I added some sheep and expanded into wool production. The land that had been damaged by the snow dumps healed completely, showing no signs of the ordeal it had been through. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The seasons turned. Snow came and went without incident. The Pine Ridge Estate's development aged, becoming just another part of the landscape rather than an invading enemy. I never forgot what happened, but I also did not dwell on it. The experience had taught me about resilience, about fighting for what is right, about the importance of community and legal protections. Those lessons were valuable, even if the way I learned them was difficult. 10 years after the incident, I was at a community meeting in Jackson when someone I did not recognize approached me. She was a young woman, probably in her late 20s, with a friendly smile. "Mr. Garcia, I am Sarah Morrison. I just wanted to thank you." "Thank me for what?" "My grandmother was the judge in your case, Judge Morrison. She passed away last year. I am sorry to hear that. She was a fair judge and a good woman. She talked about your case a lot, especially in her later years. She said it was one of the most important cases she ever handled because it reminded people that the law protects everyone, not just the powerful. She was proud of that ruling." We talked for a while, and she shared stories about her grandmother. It was touching to know that the case had meant something to Judge Morrison too, that she had seen it as more than just another dispute. As I drove home that night, back to my ranch, I reflected on everything that had happened. The illegal dumping, the court battles, the harassment, the victory, the snow-buried clubhouse, the criminal convictions, the legislative changes, all of it. The experience had changed me. I was more careful, more aware of my rights, more willing to stand up for myself and others. But I had not become bitter or angry. The ranch was still my sanctuary, the mountains still took my breath away, and Wyoming was still home. I pulled into my driveway, the headlights illuminating the fence line that had been crushed under tons of snow so many years ago. It was solid now, stronger than before. Like me. Inside, I poured myself a whiskey and sat by the window, looking out at the dark silhouettes of the mountains against the starry sky. Tomorrow I would wake up early, check on the cattle, repair whatever needed repairing, and do the 1,000 other tasks that came with ranch life. But tonight, I just sat and appreciated the peace. The hard one, well-deserved peace that came from standing up for what was right and seeing justice done. The HOA had tried to bury me under their problems. Instead, they buried themselves. And my ranch, my home, my piece of Wyoming, remained exactly where it belonged. With me, free and clear, forever protected by the law and by my willingness to fight for it. That was enough. That was everything.